No?
Oh, it's reversed.
Yeah, that wasn't it. I think we're gonna have to apologize to our Zoom friends again that something wonky with the display swap. Hopefully you'll enjoy getting a sneak peek at the next slide, unlike everybody else in the room here. Okay. Cool. Wow, you're here. Excellent. Phew. Good. All right, so welcome back. You're gonna hear from a couple of new folks, and Paul and I will be on backup vocals for this next section. We're probably 20 minutes over right now. We're gonna make up at least part of it, if not all of it, in this next section, to where we'll be eating lunch close to on time, and then we'll be again making it up in the afternoon. So we always, whenever we're moderating panels or we're doing training, we always say those those that are closest to the client, those that are closest to the client dollars get to talk first or go first. So we always start with the buy side. So let's talk about the brands and a little bit of a landscape here. I'm going to turn things over to Aaron Yazgar on our team. Aaron runs our marketer and agency global strategy team, helping everybody from the 2 banks that we mentioned earlier to a CPG we're going to reference, to a pharma that she's probably going to reference, to a retailer that she's probably going to reference, to an automotive that she might reference. And so we'll give a little bit of context around, again, specific to brands, what's happening there for marketers. And then we're going to go into, from there, the 5 stages of using a CDP for marketers and their agencies. And we're going to bring in, and we'll introduce Matt Greitzer, our special friend and guest, to help us deliver that section towards the end. So we'll hand it off to Aaron. Again, Aaron's been with us 4 or 5 years, built the first in-house programmatic practice at Live Nation, 20 years music label and industry experience before that. And so someone who's been on the brand side for a while, and someone who's been working with, fortunately, us and our clients, helping with the brand agency dynamic and those new restructured relationships in many cases. And again, leveraging tech targets and talent, helping brands and marketers, or excuse me, marketers and agencies, and obviously starting to do a bit of CDP work now. Aaron?
Thank you. Hey, everybody. So when we talk about how leaders are using data-centric strategies to become these really big giants of data, Walmart, Apple, and Amazon, I think, are really what. Can't hear me. Use this. This is connected.
I don't think it is, but if you wouldn't mind, maybe in between the 2 ferns, or between the 2 tables here, to go a little closer to these guys, so you get Zach Galifianakis fans. Good.
As I was saying, these 3 really represent the gold standard when we talk about data and a CDP. Really kind of surrounding using all of the data that they possibly can gather to market those products. So when we look at Walmart, even with retail, what we've seen in some projects also is really a lean forward. I can't remember who mentioned what second party data earlier, but really a lean forward into developing second party data, using clean rooms with their brands that are selling products who really can't get to that direct consumer other than, through promotions, maybe through some experiential kind of sponsorships, et cetera. So that is really somewhere that's been impressive to me of people working together to create these really valuable second party clean room data sets to target.
And while you transition in real time, forgive me, we have someone who, there we go.
Oh, you're using your camera.
Yeah.
Please see.
Sorry, we have 2 people that just joined the class remotely 10 minutes ago.
So when we look at the various ways that a brand can use a CDP, we really, really went into a DTC company, and really tried to look at how they were using this data, right? DTC has the best data. They're controlling all of the various, they're controlling all of the channels. So we have CRM data, we've got social data, we've got advertising data. So really a DTC brand, because they don't have that second step of selling their product to a retailer, has the richest opportunity to take advantage of CDP. There's also the phone data, right? A lot of the DTC brands will have phone sales or customer service. You know, you look back at like a brand like Guthrie Ranker, where you could order in online or you could order via phone. So really connecting those kinds of dots. And when you start consolidating that first and third party data, because you're out there in the marketplace potentially renting third party data. I love when Paul was talking earlier about, you know, remember the business. Because really when I'm talking to folks about CDPs or DMPs, I'm always like, a DMP that has third party data, it's just renting a set of mailing labels. Like that's all you're doing, except now it's cookies. So, so folding in that synonymous data really helps. And when you start to think about how you get to full funnel, the graphic that Paul was showing earlier about maybe even flipping it, we really get to that omni-channel data. And the omni-channel dream really does become a reality when you start to look at a CDP and you're taking into account all of your activities. So most companies right now, a lot of that is siloed. And you've got different departments, even under the marketing department, who are, you know, oh, I've got my email database over here and I'm taking care of that. But then somebody else is taking care of the cookie database, for lack of a better term, the mobile ID database, and those two things are not being connected. So merging that into being able to really create a full funnel, and then being able to analyze, right? So if you have all that data merged into this one place, you start to see, here's what happens with my phone sales. Here's what happens when I email somebody with my direct sale online. Here's what happens with my offline sales. So having that ability to have one place for all that marketing data, really be able to tell that story and build customer journeys is also going to help you segment and develop better marketing campaigns. So the challenge that I think most marketers have is there's only so many hours in a day. How many marketing campaigns can we put together from a creative perspective? How many segments? We all know that the world is dealing with a content challenge of how much content can I make and how quickly for my campaigns. When you get organized in a CDP, that is going to become even a larger challenge because you're really going to start to see micro segments and micro audiences. So bringing all the data together also allows you to score that low account, right? So you might start to see, we should actually, you know, we make a decent amount of money for this segment over here. Let's let it trickle in. But here is our true sweet spot. If that could be a geographic sweet spot that gets identified, that could be a product sweet spot, it could be an audience sweet spot. So there's a lot of ways to gather that, and just allows you to build that strategy. And this DTC brand had 650 different line item campaigns that we saw for products. And once we kind of went through the exercise and we started to look at what that segmentation was, they were also able to just calm down to about 15 segments that they wanted to do custom creative for, where they were trying to do a lot of creative. They were also keeping one main creative at the top of the funnel, so tons of change that we were able to gather just by putting this one project together.
This is not a Prohaska project, but I saw, I was familiar with an apparel company called Textile. Yeah, Kate Hudson. And you're seeing more of this like Hollywood marries Silicon Valley entrepreneurial concept. And so, it was very impressive what they had done, because they their first goal for their CDP was unified measurement. And once they had gathered all the data in a data lake and they had sort of homogenized all the data, they looked at measurement and they were able to take their media mix very quickly from a sort of, they were mostly in Facebook, I think, and that's the way a lot of these companies started. And they extremely diversified their media spend and saw like immediate gains. And it took them like a year to do this. So unified measurement is another sort of business case we'll talk about, and especially in the breakout sessions. It's so much more difficult for an online, offline, a mature business that's not starting out in this whole new world to do. But I found it impressive, and the attribution model they built was their own, and it took them a long time to come up with their own weighting and measurement of how things were doing. And they found like gold when they would look at their YouTube usage log and fan build, and then translate that into email, for instance, and prospect people through email. So.
And I think in terms of DTC, a lot of the newer brands, starts off as a DIY effort. And they're in there buying Facebook and buying Instagram on their own and using AdWords. And you can just see the gradual growth. Even with this particular DTC brand, their agency that they were using was still buying through AdWords and had not really tapped into the power of a larger DSP to be able to drive a lot of that data. And because they didn't have a CDP put in place, they really didn't have the segmentation to start off with. So this exercise of going through and creating these segments and figuring out what their audience segments were, that was a little different. They always just thought, here are products, and we think our products belong to each of these kinds of people. But there hadn't been that effort to say that product B actually sold this way versus product C, and create that. Well, if you're anywhere that you click on the I accept, you're consenting. So the I accept usually says, and the privacy policy usually says, to share with our partners, right? Or we sell your data at times. So then your data ends up in that third party. That's part of the challenge with CCPA, is now I'm pulling myself out for one place. Right, I come out just for that state. So managing that consent is a challenge. But whichever video, as you saw on the chart for marketers, some people can be readier than others. But really, if I'm a brand and I want to go buy women who are luxury travelers, there's plenty of lists out there right now for women who are luxury travelers, and they've all consented by clicking yes to travelandleisure.com or realcaribbean.com or whatever they use. So for the CPG company that we worked with, we really saw a lot of challenge in terms of having their media and identity and data infrastructure. So nobody was really using any data to target audiences. This particular CPG company sold a number of brands that everybody uses. And so it was just sort of this big, hey, we're just going to target everyone 18 to 65.
Anybody with a mouth or
Anybody
eyes.
with a mouth or eyes,
Yeah.
or actually recently taught a class at a brand, their home office, and power of leveraging programmatic, and they literally told me that their target is anybody with eyeballs. So we really looked and said, and they had a DMP and nobody was using it. So even though the DMP was there, we started to talk about how do we get to a CDP place where you have your data and you start to merge all your funnel data because they did have retail sales data. They were super active in social. And so they had a decent amount of consumer data that they had collected direct, a decent amount of first party. With their sales data and their retail data from their retail partners, that was super powerful data that they also were not really leveraging to do geo-targeting or use a hyper-local strategy of knowing that these particular shoppers shop at 7-Elevens or CVS's. So we really started to look at how we could bring that data set together, how they could use it. Their agency trading desk was not really doing any help as well. So again, there wasn't a strategy to leverage all this data. And what we ended up doing was looking at how do we increase that CDP, the usage of all that other data, marry it with particular retailer data, and again, get down to that lower funnel strategy. The lookalike modeling that we were able to do across the different brands was also a strategy that we put together of what is the type of customer that actually buys these 4 brands that we have, and started to think about pulling out and creating these larger buckets.
It just, because we see the market so widely and we go into some depth with these companies, you go back to that Walmart, Amazon slide, take Apple out because it's entertainment, but, and the concept of second party data, I think people have written Walmart off, which is crazy because I think they do $700 billion last year. And the power of their second party data juncture with these grocery and these CPG companies is, I think, really unsettling for Amazon to the point where they went and bought Whole Foods. I don't know that's not like something I know firsthand, but it seems to be that the 700 billion joined with all these, multi $10 billion CPG companies that's a pretty strong juncture. And I think they're sorting out like who owns what, how do they cooperate, what loyalty data, what purchase data, what consumer data comes across. But that's, people talk, Amazon has competition, definitely in this sort of formation consortium.
Well, and I also think when we saw Amazon last year start to disallow bad actors and try and work with the brands and develop some kind of relationship with the brands that are inside Amazon, you saw them also appreciate that value. How do we work with this group of brands that just come through our site? Where I think Walmart was first to the table of doing that for sure.
And you know more about this than anybody on the team, but how much did Amazon do in advertising revenue last year? 5 billion from nowhere. That's got to be sort of like unsettling for Google, Facebook, and anybody that's that's why it's a triopoly, not duopoly.
But it's all inside their network too. You have to sell inside Amazon to track that conversion and understand it, which is their key, right?
Right. And Walmart's advertising business was not insignificant.
No, but a lot of that too is Jet SEO, and there's a lot of programs that they are looking at how we do connect all that data. So I think a lot of the CPG brands also think about search a lot more than a DTC or the same level that a DTC does, but differently because their search results bring up so many different options, right? So that's another data point from a CDP perspective that can be a challenge to get, but it's possible. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cimino, who actually, for a fact, this is the first project we worked on 4.5 years ago together was on the grant.
Yeah. And this use case is it's a little older, but it's still, and it's an eye chart I'll give you, but Anybody know what Pebble Post is? So this was a very early version of what I call we call it direct response retargeting, which is when you have a mailing or an emailing, which is on the left, which is 5 million, spending $3 million, and you know exactly, like we were talking about in the joining of the two worlds, the CRM world, people know exactly how this is going to perform, the open rate, the take rate, the conversion rate, resulted in 900 sales. So they know that their profit per car, their CPA, their cost per transaction, the ECPM, however they look at productivity, is within range, and that they make 1.5 ROI on that bot. Surrounding that email or mail with a programmatic campaign, and this was just sort of retargeting off of the CRM event, with 30 million impressions over 2 months. It only cost $150,000, and the 0.3% click through with the 5% open, 2% conversion rate led to another 90 cars being sold, from what we can tell. But look at the ROI on the digital versus the physical. So this is what I was saying, is there's an entire world of machine learning, statistics, and analytics just between those two channels. And that's why we show that step ladder of when you're thinking about CDP or joining the the identity segmentation and attribution of different channels. You do it in a stepwise manner, and you think about suppression, then you think about this sort of incremental approach. I mean, this is retargeting on steroids, or analogy, but that's what it is. And Pebble Post, I don't know, they're taking this and they've built an entire business on it. And I think people, when you said to them, look, I'm going to retarget off of email programmatically, or mail, which I think, do they do email now, or is it still in the mail?
Started there, I think they've bridged in.
For most VCs, I think they passed because it sounded like a snooze, or and really another sort of not so well known fact that we see across the industry is our industry, ad tech or mad tech, sort of a mixture of ad tech and martech, we've forgotten about mail and email, and they're very sexy. And mixing them with digital is becoming state of the art, which is sort of back to the future.
Right, because email was also dead.
Right.
Email was in the ground with Walmart.
Right.
And it turns out email might be a future unique identifier that we all can relate to around the world, that most people have.
Well, and I will say that folks actually get the biggest return on their email databases because it's your first party data. Those are your customers. So as long as you are not badgering, email is a really powerful tool. Not a Prohaska project, but at one point, it was a challenge. It used to be a challenge to get Excel into an email. And folks were like, well, we don't have that functionality, et cetera. And now you just see that retargeting capability from email that people are doing, and then attaching it to that particular client who has a history of purchasing and didn't purchase through this email. So just reminding them, we were talking to a political client a couple of months ago even, who really just, they're the people that flood your mailbox with everything. And we talked to them about how do you use your email and how do you use media as an extension. And they really didn't have a database that told them about their constituents. They just had a database of email addresses. So a lot of ability to connect those data points into a full marketing strategy.
Cool, thank you guys. So a little bit of background, some use cases, some real life examples, hopefully that can translate whether you're a branded agency, publisher, or anybody else in between. So some context around the 5 stages. We've done the 5 stages for 7 years, and the we used to be me at the New York Times when I built the 5 stages of programmatic selling for our global team of 180 people in-house, because I don't know about you, whenever I've tried to learn software or tried to learn to do anything, it's always easier having the people actually do it. It's tough to demonstrate that. We're thinking of giving everyone sandboxes, and maybe we'll do that with our Adobe friends next time and create a campaign or whatever. But getting into the rhythm, at least, of what everyone does during a normal day is what we found can get it most relatable, instead of a lot of wonky slides and then, all right, what do I do again tomorrow when I go back? Because the whole point is that we don't think programmatic buying, programmatic selling, or using a CDP is something that we always say, you know, you're doing your normal job and then, all right, it's time for my CDP job, and you go put on some special Martian helmet, go into an air chamber, and then do that for 2 hours and come out, and that was crazy. All right, then you're back. We just think this is going to be part of your normal job. So you'll see that hopefully these 5 stages are familiar. And again, we'll bring up our friend Mac Reitzer at the end of this, who helped craft a lot of this with us. And so these are the 5 stages. Get your strategy in place, get your design set up, collect and integrate. We heard integration a couple of times and said, yeah, you're going to see that word, very key. Obviously then activating, and then of course everything is about optimizing and rinse repeat. So I'll toss to Aaron again to lead these out, since we've been helping some brands and agencies do that, and we'll ask our friend Mac Reitzer that I'll formally introduce when we get to stage 5, which is a lot of what his great new firm does to give context, but he may chime in from the front row over here.
So really creating a strategy, it's about pulling back, what are we trying to do? When a couple of clients recently, what were those goals? We're looking at increasing repeat customers, activating lapsed customers, and converting unknown users to known. So really trying to figure out who those people are that are coming to the site. There was a lot of discussion around, testing out really small different product segments as well. So trying to really get a handle on what that actual goal is as you're going to start to merge this data together and how it's going to work together is really important. So then knowing if we need these pieces of data to come together to create an omni-channel approach to this particular segment, to be able to be deployed across the various channels like Facebook and email. We also really think that the A/B testing of a site or that creative, whether you are driving somebody to the site or not, can be a big part of this as well. So the creative data, and when we start to think about how dynamic creative is starting to come in as an important piece of the mix, creative, that testing scenario as well to understand and connect those dots. Had a conversation last week about, well, we now know that that creative performed really well. How do we connect that dot to the people who actually purchased tickets? And what more do we know about them? And what other things did they buy tickets to? Realizing that there was a missing piece in terms of connecting those data points. Marketing IT for maximum ownership. Who manages the CDP? Who's responsible for the adoption of it within the organization? And who's responsible for that data quality? There is definitely an IT approach to CDP development. We've had a couple of products where we walked in the door and the IT folks are owning the CDP. Sort of a Groundhog Day with the DMP in terms of when the DMP started. Oh, it's a platform. IT should own it. It's a complicated platform to potentially build. You might be able to find something that can be customized, but there is that programming part of it that you really need it. But in turn, it should really be joint ownership a lot of the time. And responsible for adoption. The only way it's going to be adopted is if a marketing person is talking about it and talking about how to connect those dots. And I'm sure there'd be an IT person who would debate me on that, but I might be biased. But really understanding the use cases And it's only the person who's planning that campaign and understands how all of the data can connect together that can really drive that kind of adoption within a company. And that conversation really can't come from the platform build perspective as effective as it can show an actual campaign in action. For data quality, you want to count on IT, 100%.
Sorry, Aaron, I was just gonna add that point. You can save a lot of time, with a lot of problems, aligning organizationally up front, especially with CDP where you know, as a buyer, you might be in a BI organization or an IT organization or a marketing organization. But all three of those functions have to work together very seamlessly in order for this to work.
Absolutely.
So if you come in the door, you know, without aligning, you know, you got an organizational problem, a motivation problem, and an operational problem. So you can solve that up front if you get all those things.
Thanks for bringing up the BI piece because the BI piece is a big part of this. The CPG client that we were talking about earlier really had no BI support internally in the company in order to execute on this. Their BI support was at the agency. And so it wasn't the agency's job to connect sales data to media data, et cetera. So that person really was like, I need some folks from the BI team to be a part of this effort. Otherwise, we aren't going to be able to connect those dots.
And I just say from a lessons learned, what not to do is one is, and Matt's sort of mentioned it, is like ready, fire, aim. The concept of a CDP comes into the university. Question? Oh. No, yeah, is there's no strategy because there's probably no management leadership, and this goes back to the organizational structure and someone who's leading market, or you know, and having some kind of financial case that the CFO is bought into. And the other situation we see is sort of the mislabeling of what is a CDP. We've seen data lakes come out of the IT organization and out of the finance area, which are commonly the same thing. And these are data lakes, but they're really, the business case for them is because the company wants better, faster information for financial purposes. Like they want to hit their street numbers better. They want to, you know, like the purpose of it is not marketing. And then we've seen what we call hostage situations where the IT organization is coveting the CDP because it's the new thing, it's the whatever, and they're and the marketing people get sort of not locked out, but they become sort of customers of that group, which, you know, we still think this needs to sit either in a balanced area under that CDO or with the marketing department.
The data lake, I'm just remembering the agency that was trying to collect all the linear TV information against the digital, and it was the IT department that was pretty much building this thing that was going to help the marketing department, or the marketing teams, the media buying teams. And once you looked at it from a media perspective, you realized that all of the linear TV was being looked at from a financial perspective. So that was an interesting one.
I work like on both sides of the publishing agency and commerce. So to Matt's point about aligning all teams, I might be the only lawyer in the room, but you should probably start with your legal department to make sure that you actually can execute your campaign. Because if you go down the line and at the last minute involve legal and there are regulatory issues or something like that, then you're screwed and you can't. You wasted all this time, effort, and money, and it's just a waste. So
It's great advice.
It's true. I mean, I used to joke in the beginnings of the interwebs days that, you know, I had a junior bar association badge on my sweater because I pretty much, you know, couldn't do anything without going and checking it's legal. The privacy policies on your website, all the language around being put into a database on a regular basis. You know, we talk to clients and say, have you cleared this through? Sometimes it puts a halt to something. It takes a few months to get something changed, but it's a really good point.
It can be like if you've ever built a house or know somebody that built a house and they didn't get all the zoning square. Or they didn't, in some towns, if they didn't pay off the right people, the people come out, it doesn't matter how much of the house is built, the house is not getting finished.
Contract negotiations, especially with very large commerce companies, can take a very long time. It has to go through many different stages, like procurement and all these other people. So if you involve everybody at the beginning, it will expedite the process.
Yeah, and it's very hard because if you go to the council first, it can slow this process down to where it's not commercially viable. So Prohaska advocates sort of, you have to keep the council and the lawyers informed, but you cannot let them be the spine of the progress of the project. So it's a, you need a big consulting firm. That's what you really
You just, your attendance here is just validated. We were originally thinking, because obviously you can see that there could be an entire day, just CDP folks for marketing teams, for IT teams. We're gonna do one just CDP and CCPA for lawyers.
Yeah,
Just
risk is just,
Deb in the room, yeah, it's solidly, literally start there. So maybe we still do that. So I want to be sensitive to time and our friends at Adobe that we know we're gonna want to get up here in about 10, 15 minutes and we have 4 key stages to get through next.
So looking at designing the campaign, where do you collect that data from? Much to the legal point, where is that data useful? Can we actually take it and put it together? What do we collect about the users? As Paul was saying before, the dirty practice of marrying PII and non-PII data, where now everybody is kind of just going down that path because it gives a full view. How current and valid is it? We start to look if we're using any kind of third-party data that we want to bring in and match with our own data. How valid is that? And then where's your segmentation strategy? How are you going to break them out, and what kind of taxonomies will you be putting in place to manage your segments? So, as we were talking about the creative conversation earlier of, are different people getting different creative? Are we starting off in email and then bringing them down so the taxonomy can be applied to different parts of the campaign, whether that be the funnel, whether that be the creative funnel, whether it be a messaging taxonomy. So how will that be put across the different data? And then what governance do we need around consent and the right of access? As we just talked about, really understanding and other people are using. Thanks. Wow.
Self-service. The CDP's already said, we already know what you're going to transition. So I want to toss and bring in to meet Sean, and this is his slide, but it's also a lot of his thinking and work that we did for a bank a while back. You can see some other applications around maybe a way to visualize this internally or with your other agency or tech partners.
Yeah, no, actually should stand there. We got people on here, but not good. Really wanted to highlight this, and as we look at the opportunity here and the way we think about data, most of this comes from first-party data. Obviously, a key portion of the conversation, the unique competitive advantage. So having that proprietary data is certainly critical. How do we bring in third-party data? Right now, everything is a static segment. We can have examples of different types of data, but the value here of the CDP is how can all those be integrated together to create the certain segment. So making the foundation, leveraging everything that we have to be fundamentally rooted in the first-party data. Again, that's competitive advantage, differentiated CRM. We go back to the example Paul alluded to where we're bringing in the CRM aspect, the email that went out, how do we follow it up? Using our data, overlaying the additional segments that may be a gap in maybe that second-party data, if that exists, and some great examples of that were highlighted. Rest falls into third-party data. So thinking of this more three-dimensionally, it's not just we're going to do a combination of first and third. What is the offer and the right alignment that goes with that? So just visually thinking this as three-dimensional, and clearly there's going to be some more dimensions that come into it. It was hard to visually show for and more, but that was really the focus here.
But what I would point out too here was it was very siloed data. When we looked at the organization, there were silos, like clean cut silos. And so Amit and team really worked hard at bringing those silos together. And the client did a good job of bringing
stakeholders from those silos together as well to be able to craft this kind of cross-product data use.
Just gonna add one point, I know we're running late, but the critical point here, and I think it's come up and just what Aaron alluded to, is this is really gonna be effective when we think of data, when you look at this from an enterprise. This isn't my division has this, and certainly that's viable and a great building block. The true value, when you look at this organizationally, is all of the various data assets that exist. So if we take an enterprise level approach, you've got different division, different units, different touch points that everyone has. That tells that story, first, third, and what the appropriate offer and touch points may be. So thinking of this as enterprise level solutions.
So then stage 3 here, collecting and integrating, this is when we start to actually make the magic. There are some systems you see in that middle column that are one-click integrations, and we'll have Matt explain the asterisk because CRMs certainly are varied in terms of how many clicks those integrations take. And then you have the option of going custom or a little more, greater than one clicks there. And you're talking about in-house use CRM and managing that for the data coming in, and then leveraging call centers and pushing it out to BI so the rest of the company can understand how to utilize this, pushing that out. But Matt, you want to touch on a little bit? For folks who don't know the why and swap of CRM.
And so your CDP is going to have a bunch of plug-and-play integrations. And when CDPs are comparing feature sets, they're going to have, we have 60, we have 80, we have 120 plug-and-play integrations with your MarTech ecosystem, your ESP, your site analytics, your SMS. They're going to have data in and data out. On CRM, if you're using Salesforce, that's going to be a plug-and-play integration. If you have some homegrown CRM that's 20 years old that's cobbled together, that's going to be a custom integration. So you probably will have to do some manual integrations with the CDP, but the majority of what you're going to need, they will have some sort of pre-built integration.
Thanks. Stage 4. Holy cow, we've actually done all the right prep work. It's time to activate. You've got your different types of segments that are by trigger, propensity, and value. The music is made, pun intended, in orchestrating the messaging strategy. Oh, by the way, making sure that it's the right message, not just right screen, right person, right time, right geo, but also what the heck are we saying, and obviously leveraging the canvas at that specific touch point, paid, earned, and owned. And then how is that deployed across paid, earned, and owned? So again, a little bit of a broken record beating the drum on the ownership and how critical it is to know who's on first and to actually huddle, have the manager set the lineup card in terms of who is playing and going in what order, and then going out and deploying so it isn't a little foobar. So stage 5, we'll finally give him the appropriate intro here and who's this guy talking over here. So Matt Greitzer, check your LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. He's got a pretty impressive background. The last 4 companies all started with A. Did Actable start with A intentionally? That's
it's kind of a theme.
I figured it was, yeah. So you'll see he came right out of school and worked for one of the OG digital agencies, Razorfish. What's that? What? I saw the Razorfish / Avenue A. I couldn't remember what year. It wasn't Eyeballs though, was it?
It was.
Yeah, it was. Nice. All right. So all you trivia wonks or people who called on Eyeballs like we did 22 years ago, 20 years ago. Yeah, so he started there, and then you'll see a pretty good rise. And most recently was the co-founder of Accord Media that successfully joined the Merkle and IPG family. You'll hear about Merkle alum Angie Ng. It's a total coincidence. We have 3 ex-Merkle people that are up here speaking in one day. And Matt and another pretty smart guy out in Seattle have co-founded a group called Actable that you can go ahead and give the I want to give it proper because it feels like it could be a little bit of CDP light managed service, right?
Yeah, I mean, Actable is a first-party data agency. So what we do is work with marketers to organize their data, analyze it, and activate it across channels. So it tends to put us pretty squarely in the CDP space today. And for us, it's really interesting to work with Prohaska as sort of independent arbiters in the space who are giving objective advice on what people should do and how they should do it in this evolving space. We really believe that there's going to be an ecosystem in this area. Certainly when Adobe talks, they're sort of helping to build that ecosystem, but advising and executing in customer data is something we do. And I'll be sensitive to time because I know you're trying to get.
No, good. This is your bread and butter, and obviously, good agencies optimize like crazy. Right?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Matt. Yeah, so, and I would say on stage 4, that is really ongoing. So stages 1 to 3, it's kind of preparatory in trying to get things live and sort of setting the foundation. Stage 4, segmentation, orchestration, and activation, that is sort of your ongoing operationalization of the CDP, and that's really what you've invested in, is how do I take all the stuff that I've done with data and deploy that in the market to make better marketing decisions and better marketing activations. What we talk about in stage 5 is measuring the ROI, and this is a question that we'll ask customers whenever we meet with them, is, well, how are we planning on measuring ROI? And we usually get 1 or 2 answers. First answer is sort of, well, how are other people doing it? So we get that, okay, well, we'll have that conversation, we'll tell you how other people are doing it. And the second answer is more of a kind of a brand or arbitrary, we expect a 20x return. We expect 20x return on our investment over the first 12 months. Okay, well, how did you get there? And how are you going to work backwards to achieve that? So the measurement's important, I think, setting up metrics initially so that you can evaluate the success. And when somebody asks you, 9 months in, well, what do we get out of this? You can have that as a benchmark to evaluate success. And there's sort of kind of 3 ways to do it, we think, maybe more, but the 3 that we usually recommend are, 1 is just lift over benchmark. I mean, you have an established marketing program today. The outbound benefits of CDP are usually through marketing. So efficacy increases in your email, in your Facebook deployments, in your media deployments, in your personalization that you can tie back to increase customer value. Benchmarking that and then evaluating it over time is one way to do it, and probably a fundamental way to do it for people who have internal benchmarks they can use and deploy that to that math. New efficiencies and new capabilities, sort of 2 sides of the same coin. But new efficiencies is basically time saving. We have a customer who, through the deployment of their CDP, there's sort of a process of creating segments, pulling them out of the database, uploading them into their ESP, and then getting data back out of that. It took them 4 hours a week. With the CDP up and running, it took them 20 minutes. That's every week of the year. So the efficiency saving, if you scale that across your team, how much time is it saving? That's another metric to look at and pay attention to. And then new capabilities are just simply things you couldn't do before. Orchestration, for example, a lot of the orchestration that you can do in the CDP platform and the intelligence behind that is net new. And then the ROI on that net new capabilities is something that you can measure. So measurement's important. I think eventually, so if you're investing in a CDP, you will eventually get asked, what is the return we're getting on this platform? Industry benchmarks say you should get 10x or 20x. I think that's kind of arbitrary, but you can certainly do that if you measure it. And then advancement and maturity is really sort of stages of enlightenment of CDP deployments. Predictive capabilities. Some of the CDPs have them built in. Some make it very easy for you to build on top of predictive capabilities. So really deploying predictive modeling, can predict churn versus reacting to churn, for example, is something that you can sort of gauge yourself against. Digital transformation, really using the CDP as a customer-centric tool rather than a channel-centric tool, but a customer-centric tool to affect digital transformation across the business is another thing that you can look at. We see customers sort of plan their roadmaps along this line. And then cross-channel success, we talked a little bit about organizational alignment and organizational development. But that is one of the major challenges to the CDP, successful CDP adoption are organizational silos and how companies have organized over the last 20 years or 30 years to get around data and digital and the fragmentation there. It kind of comes back together when you start thinking about customer and focusing on customer versus channel and focusing on channel. So measuring organizational alignment and how that comes together is, again, sort of advanced, sort of, 301 level CDP success, but that's something you can also do, and we certainly see customers who are looking at that as a long-term benchmark success. So hopefully that gives you some sense of, so tactically and then more strategically, how you can look at the deployment, measure it, optimize it, and at the end of the day, save for the investment.
Thank you, sir. We're going to do a quick laptop change live so we can get Adobe set up. And I'm going to ask an intentional transition question related to this, please, while I there you are, Mike. Boom. So, Matt, out of those 5 stages in the relatively early, but we know you and Craig and the gang have been at this for a little while, pre-actable and post. Where are the most mistakes made that you're seeing? Wrong order, missing a step, just really failing at stage 5, or what?
Honestly, well, I would say stages 2 and 3, you're going to get help. You're going to get help. Fundamentally, they're going to have somebody who will help with the connections and the hooks and getting data in. They're going to do it for you, but they're going to help. So one, I would say the pre-planning and organizational alignment. We see a lot of times CDP comes in from IT, for better or worse, I think well-intentioned, but it comes in from IT, and then all the ROI use cases are for marketing. And there's been no communication about that, prior to the introduction. So stage 1 for sure. And then 4 and 5. 4 being, real, solid executional expertise. In 2020, it's not really a scaled thing. There aren't that many people who are expert practitioners of CDP, ongoing management. The measurement piece is just one of the general. So I would say 1, 4, and 5.
Good deal. Thank you, Matt. So we're going to go right to, so for those of you, again, schedules, we're going to do the Adobe buy-side demo here. We're going to break for lunch, and then we're going to go sell-side and do 180 on that. Mike Raguso is here. He's a solutions consultant at Adobe. Yeah, it's kind of like what we do. So we're all doing the same thing, right? It's nice. You can never pick your sponsors, but there were 3 companies we were kind of hoping one of them would be our first anchor here, and this is obviously one of them. So we're thrilled that they've agreed to participate, and again, unique having some solutions on both sides of the fence. Mike will give you a little bit of history of Adobe, certainly, and you might be familiar with 1 or 11 divisions of Adobe, but maybe not as much as this. And so they're very symbolic of certainly the tech coming together in a lot of different ways to be able to leverage all of the integrated targets so that the real human beings, the talent, can utilize it better on now the buy side, and then later you'll see the sell side as well. So with that, take it away, Mike.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Again, Mike Ragusa, solution consultant at Adobe, specifically aligned as an expert SC to everything audience related. So that spans across the DMP, the CDP, which is an application service that sits on top of a EP or experience platform. We're going to get into all of that, the differentiation, and kind of the lines in the sand between those different solutions. So I understand that's obviously can be somewhat confusing. In terms of agenda, we've got a few things lined up here in terms of this is not progressing. There we go. So a quick overview of Adobe Audience. We're going to talk about identity, kind of unified profile, that real-time CDP as a use case of experience platform. I know there's a lot here, but we also have a second session for more of that publisher perspective coming up this afternoon. So whatever we don't get to now, we can kind of shift over to that publisher session. But just to kind of start, I thought it would be helpful to just get some context with regard to the Adobe Experience Cloud and the historic solutions that we have as a part of that cloud. So if we think about this kind of as a pyramid and foundationally begin with Adobe Analytics, that's kind of at the forefront with regard to that real-time behavioral attribute, both mobile and desktop collection, data collection, right? So all those different real-time signals being collected and then passed via what we refer to as key value pairs into either historically Audience Manager, which is our DMP, or our real-time CDP, or into Experience Platform. And then when we think about those stages, this is kind of stages, I'd say 3 and 4. We really have data coming in, data going out, the reconciliation of those different data sources from first, second, and third third-party data, online attributes, offline attributes, purchase-based transactions, so on and so forth. Being able to augment that with data from audience marketplace or third-party attributes, doing things like lookalike modeling and algorithmic modeling, and then being able to take those segments, and of course, the major component here, activation, right? So having that one single source of truth, one single segment definition, instead of building segments in all of the independent point solutions themselves, which is never going to be an apples to apples comparison, having one single common denominator, if you will, of that segment definition, so you can send it out to your ad servers, to the DSPs, to the ESPs, so on and so forth. AEM, we're not going to talk about much today. Think about this as where the content marries the data to actually fuel a lot of these experiences. Obviously, oversimplifying a lot of these solutions, but AEM can be used from anything to physically creating and building a site to actually being more of like a DAM and an asset management library where all that rich content lives. So when you're thinking about actually activating segments from either the DMP or the CDP into any of these top layer orchestration tools, again, just very simplistically, AdCloud, this is more of your programmatic activation layer. This spans everything between video, display, native search. Adobe Target, this is site-side personalization. So when a user actually comes to a site, Adobe Target would call the CDP or the DMP in real time and ask what segment or segments does this user belong to, either of those two platforms returning those real-time results, so that Target can decide which experience is most relevant for this user. Magento and Marketo, two of our most recent acquisitions, Magento being more of a commerce clouder engine, whereas Marketo is more of a B2B campaign orchestration email tool, and Adobe Campaign being more of that B2C cross-channel, direct mail, push notification, text, email, and everything in between. So most recently, what we've begun developing, and which went GA May 25th of 2019, is the Adobe Experience Platform. And the reason we began developing this initially was actually to solve for an Adobe problem. So like most other marketing clouds out there, this is comprised of a lot of acquisitions over the course of the past decade and further, right? And what we've done is when we actually acquired Demdex, which was mentioned earlier, which is now Audience Manager, that was actually happened in 2011. By the time 2013 came along, we took a lot of that behind the scenes infrastructure that was the DMP and began utilizing that as our identity resolution layer across the entire Adobe Experience Cloud. So all those different solutions, those point solutions that we just showed on that previous slide. And that worked quite well for us right through 2013 up until probably last year, where we had this persistent identifier, because most DMPs and CDPs historically were, for the most part, when we're talking about digital, were predicated on third-party cookies, right? And we know that those are becoming less and less dependable, less and less stable. So Adobe has this third-party cookie, of course, it's still relevant for media use cases and doing ID syncs with different DSPs and ad servers and activation layers. But we also have this first-party identifier, which we refer to as the Experience Cloud ID, which is essentially the vessel that allows us to pass segments from one solution to another. And again, that's worked quite well, but in some use cases, so specifically anytime you see these arrows injected into the ecosystem, that's introducing some form of latency. So when you're going from an anonymous system like a DMP that doesn't contain any PII to a known system like an ESP that is predicated on email address, which is PII, in some of those use cases, there could be some form of latency. So when we started designing Experience Platform, it was to really make all this as real-time as humanly possible, hence this single profile and this single platform. So in essence, when you're thinking about use cases like real-time suppression or frequency capping across multiple systems or real-time personalization, if you have any of these arrows or this latency anywhere in the equation, because I mean, the real-time experience is only as real-time as the most lag you have in the equation, right? So if you have a 24-hour lag in one of these steps, that's the quickest any of this will work in your daisy chain. So when we started thinking about this unified platform, it was all about how do we connect all these dots and have all these different systems reside on one infrastructure so that we were able to basically ingest and egress data from that system in real time, right? So if you think about it, all those solutions we were just looking at, you have some on Azure, some on AWS, some on-prem, some in the cloud. So the idea here is let's put everything into this one common ecosystem. So that instead of moving data around and duplicating and replicating segments, you have one centralized repository that everything is drawing from in real time. And as we started creating this experience platform, this was around the same time, 2-3 years ago, where we really started to see this bubble in CDP within the industry. And Adobe looked at the CDP very critically, and we said, well, do we acquire a CDP? Do we start building our own CDP from scratch? So we started to evaluate all the CDP players in the space. And we said, well, what's the common denominator between all these guys? And we quickly realized there was none, right? A lot of CDPs have their genesis in very different areas. Some are very focused in and came out of tag managers. Others are very focused on analytics, others in journey orchestration. And we said, well, if the major common denominator here is the blending of anonymous data, like a DMP, and PII from your CRM databases, the ability to perform identity resolution across those different data sets and do segmentation and activation in people-based channels like Facebook and Google, as well as your typical device-based activation channels like DSPs and ad servers, well then Experience Platform does that. But it does a whole lot more with regard to data science, which we're going to get into a little bit more in the publisher section. So to break this down a little bit more into kind of just different specific areas, if we go back to data in and data out, if we think about the data ingestion component, again, this could be streaming in real time from any of your analytics tools or Adobe Analytics. This could be coming from EDWs, this could be coming from data lakes, CRM tools, reconciling all that data into one unified profile into what we have as our kind of core component of platform, right? Identity resolution, unified profile, data science workspace, which is again, this is the blending of both IT and marketer tools. And we're gonna get into this more in the publisher section, but being able to not just have your typical CDP features that we're all used to seeing in your typical point solution CDPs, but also for IT and for data science, having the ability to bring in, ingest different models, propensity scores and things of that nature, and have those models continually running on top of your data sets that exist for your marketing tools, and both of those worlds living under the same hood. That was the vision here, right? And then also query service to be able to basically, whether it's from an API, so again, platform was really meant to be open and extensible. You see a lot of Adobe logos up here. There's a lot of unique interoperability here between Adobe solutions and some additional benefits. But if you wanted to build your own applications on top of Experience Platform, we have hundreds of APIs that are basically in place. So if you want to build your own, if you have a call center use case, or you have some sort of a financial institution use case where you want to be able to look up that profile, if I come into a branch for FSI, and in real time, if you want to plug in my member number or my account number, and you want to be able to retrieve all the different interactions I've had, both digital and in branch over the course of the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, or even further back, this would be able to basically give a next best offer type of use case. So we understand that there's going to be use cases here that exist outside of the Adobe ecosystem, which is why we have those APIs in place. So the way we kind of reimagine this is those different point solutions we were looking at are now referred to as applications that sit in this top layer. Those are typically your data in and data out components. Whereas now we have what we refer to as application services that are built on top of the Experience Platform. So one of those, which we're obviously focused on today, is this idea of the real-time CDP. This is your marketer-friendly dashboard that sits on top of platform that has a lot of those connectors that were before mentioned for your Salesforce and being able to send data out to, yes, Adobe, but also out to the Trade Desk and out to AppNexus and to different Eloqua and different ESPs. And then also this idea of journey orchestration. So being able to create this path that's basically a listening tool. So if any event could spark a one-to-one marketing orchestration. And I think historically, a lot of people have thought about journey orchestration as, let me take a list and send it out to a tool and have that tool basically send out a batch form of communication to all of my prospects or to all of my customers. This is more of a one-to-one orchestration, meaning that if I come to a customer site and I conduct some sort of a specific action, that event in real time is going to place me into a journey that says, okay, now in real time, let's fire off some sort of a push notification. And if that push notification goes unread for 20 minutes, let's go ahead and send an email. If the email gets clicked on, great, take me out of the journey. If that also goes unread, let's send a display advertisement. And then not just any display advertisement, but let's use the offers library that's going to reference all the different content that you have available to blend the right offer with the right piece of content to the right person on the right device at the right time. And then lastly, another component here is that customer journey analytics, which essentially is, if anybody here is familiar with Adobe Analytics, the analysis workspace feature with where you're able to take any of that dimensional data, which has traditionally been just your first party Adobe Analytics data. But now being able to blend that with any data coming in for media engagement, second and third party attributes, any of these different journey interactions, and having all that data available within this canvas of analysis workspace to do drag and drop analysis in real time. I'm going to pause there. Does anybody have any questions on kind of this architecture?
So how does the data from like the offsite media come into the Adobe Analytics?
Yep, so it can come in a couple different ways. So if you have pixels in place, that could flow directly into platform. Thus, it would appear in Adobe Analytics. If you're using something like log files, then there would be an ID sync, and that would be brought into a platform as well, thus also available in Analytics.
Out of the box, like already?
Yes. Well, I mean, you have to bring in the data. So if it's pixels, then you have to deploy those in your emails and your display campaigns. And if it's log files, then those would be dropped regularly into an S3 bucket, which would then be ingested into the platform at any cadence that you dictate, whether it's hourly or quicker. Yep. And then you could use those same metrics for suppression and or frequency capping. Yep. Cool.
Is it similar to a DMP pixel?
Yes.
So basically, say an Adobe pixel.
Yes. That's right. Which brings us to the next point. What is the difference between DMP, real-time CDP, and experience platform? So as you can imagine, we get asked this quite regularly. So I put this slide together a couple of months ago. The way to think about this is additive. It's not this or that. So as you move from left to right, you're adding in additional features. When we think about DMPs are still great for traditional media use cases, being able to ingest anonymous data. And again, when we say anonymous, that doesn't mean that we don't know who this user is. We can still ingest IDs that are declared IDs, which could be customer IDs, they could be CRM IDs. You can always back out to an individual PII file if you had to, but still really good at ingesting third-party data from Audience Marketplace, doing things like lookalike modeling, doing things like audience testing via audience labs, and then of course being able to activate that data. And we'll get into data governance just in a little bit. But then real-time CDP, now we start to look at more of the known profiles. So these are really blending all the PII that would typically exist within a CRM or in an EDW, and then being able to kind of bridge that and unify that into a common schema. So I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on this idea of an XDM or an experience data model, but essentially it's a flexible taxonomy, if you will, that whenever you're ingesting all these different data fragments or experience fragments, as we call them, from all these disparate sources that are probably all formatted differently, and you're pointing them all at the CDP. Well, how do we know that Mike Ragusa is the same as Mike _Ragusa? Well, we have this idea of an experience data model that when you set this up within platform or real-time CDP, anytime you point your data sets at platform, they're all kind of organized into this unified schema or taxonomy before they actually hit a data set. Because when we talk about structured versus unstructured data, which again, we're not going to go into in great depth today, but when you're talking about being able to do use cases like data science and things like media activation, it all boils down to, at the end of the day, it needs to be in some sort of structure, right? You can't use unstructured data to be able to conduct those types of use cases. So that's what the XDM does. As already mentioned, we have some of these out-of-the-box connectors, which we'll see when we get into the demo, and then advanced segmentation. So I think when everybody typically thinks of a DMP, it's a lot of these kind of rudimentary Boolean logic segments. If they've been to the site or they've done this but have not converted, that's my segment, right? So we still have that within platform / real-time CDP. It's just there's a lot of additional attributes that you can bring into the platform and more flexibility in terms of how you can set those up. Yeah.
The way you think about CDP then is it truly just another thing that you have, or is it replacing things that you currently have? It feels like you're just like adding another data structure
That's a good question. Yep, totally. So that's one of the things we wanted to avoid when doing this is and we've seen some folks that currently use DMPs, Adobe DMP, we've seen go out there and buy point solution CDPs. And depending on your use case, a lot of them can be really good, but the last thing you want to do, to your point, I think, is you don't want to create another silo where it's like, I have all my data in the DMP, I have all my data in the data lake, now I have a CDP, I got to do more ID syncs, and that's the last thing. So what we did was by creating this application that sits on top of the platform, everything's built on the same identity namespace, right? So also having the flexibility of using email, or maybe it's your own internal ID. Point being, I think it depends, there's no flat line answer for every marketer out there. I think it depends on your current tech stack. But I think that, you know, if I'm being honest, I think that in a couple of years, or maybe even sooner, I think a lot of the stuff that customers are doing right now in DMP will probably be able to be performed in these two solutions. I think right now, these are still very complementary, even from an activation standpoint, right? I think it was mentioned before that if you're doing an analysis between several different CDPs, one of the biggest points is, well, I have this many activation partners, I have this many connectors. Audience Manager has been one of the leading DMPs for so long that we have a ton of those connections already in place. So you could leverage the DMP as your activation point. So do I see the platform/CDP replacing technology? Sure, but it's going to be a different variation or combination depending on your tech stack. Yeah. Sure. So in this instance, this is just, think about known as like PII. Like if I was to subscribe for a newsletter and I put Mike Ragusa with my specific address and my phone number and my unhashed email address, that would be a known user. Versus in the DMP ecosystem, we don't have any of that data in there. We have hashed email addresses, and we could have like CRM ID 1234 and cookie ID, you know, ABC. Those are all like anonymous, unknown users.
So when we have the like segmentation of PII and non-PII, are those still, is the data still, you know? So I'm trying to reconcile those two bullet points with it being known information. Is it just that the application has to be PII?
No, it definitely doesn't have to be. So for instance, if I come to a site and I don't log in and I take no action whatsoever, I'm on a brand new machine that you've never seen me on before, right? At that time, Adobe's still going to drop a first and third party cookie and still begin collecting all the different attributes behaviorally that you're doing on the site. Now, if I come into a branch and I do something, they have my account number. At that time, those are two separate profiles. We have something called profile merge policies that allows you to dictate how and when those should be blended together. But now let's take that one step further. Now I return to the site and I do log in. Well, those cookies are already there. So now let's take all the known data I have about this user from the branch experience and blend that with all the unknown anonymous actions I've taken on site prior to actually authenticating, and blend those all together into one profile. And we'll see that more in the demo.
So that will branch out the data.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, so anonymous user never been to the site before, do some stuff.
Yep.
Later on come back.
Yep.
Maybe different events, log in.
Yeah, so in that, yeah, sure. So where am I speaking into? Just where I am is fine? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so there's two components to that question, right? So the first one is if I'm on the same browser or the same device and I'm conducting all those different behavioral attributes and I don't log in, those are still being collected, IDs are set, that profile exists, but my name isn't tied to it. It's just an anonymous gut person, right? Now, if I go to a branch and I start, I open up a savings account or a checking account, credit card application, all that data lives in a separate profile. Now, if I come back to the same browser on the same device, that's where the cookies and IDs are stored, or at the browser level, then those two profiles are married. If it's a different device on a different browser and or a different device, then it would be an authentication event that blends the two devices together. And that's where what we refer to as a device co-op. So that's where identity graphs come into play, right? What I just mentioned is a very deterministic option. Is I log in on one device, I log in on another device, we marry those two profiles, we create a cluster. We have another option, which we'll get into in just a little while, called the Adobe Co-op, which is a blend of deterministic and probabilistic. It's 70% deterministic, 30% probabilistic. It's a collective environment of over 100 marketers that are all contributing to this device graph. Adobe is one of the contributors to this device graph. So you have over 250 million individual unique users in this graph. over, I think, 1 billion different devices in North America. So that would be the device graph that's blending multiple devices, but it's the deterministic stitch that's blending together those profiles on the same device. Yes?
Is your third-party data, the unknown data, is that your client's hash data, like all combined and pulled together to create that subset of unknown data, or is it specifically with each individual client and they connect to?
Yep, so good question. So within the DMP, we have that marketplace that exists where you can go in there, you can say, I don't know what, I'm looking for this, but I don't know who to get it from, right? There's so many third-party data providers out there that you can kind of do some analysis within the DMP. You see the pricing structure, what are their use cases, are they GDPR compliant? If you check the checkbox and you decide to onboard that third-party data within the DMP, it's automatically blended to all of your individual profiles that it can be blended to, right, that we've done a sync with. If we're talking about the CDP, that's a little bit of a different animal because a lot of third-party data providers have in their terms and conditions that they don't want their data blended in environments that contain PII. So essentially, if you have third-party data residing in the DMP, we have these data export controls where you flag your data source and your destination. This data source contains third-party data. This destination is an ESP and should not be married, or contains PII, right? And should not be married to third-party data. So that's like a self-governing tool that helps you self-police. So if you try to send that like third-party data to an ESP or to a CDP, audience managers say, no, you shouldn't do that because these are the terms of what you've agreed to with the third-party data set. With that said, if you have your own relationship with a third-party data provider and they've signed off on allowing you to send it to a destination like a CDP, that's fine. You can have that feed sent directly to the CDP, perhaps daily, weekly, monthly, any cadence that you deem necessary, and then that data is ingested and appended to profiles. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we talked about DMP, we talked about kind of the added advantages of real-time CDP. Now, real-time CDP sits on top of Experience Platform, and some of the major benefits of Experience Platform, as we mentioned before, is the blending of all those marketing tools that we've discussed kind of so far, right? But then also this whole idea of data science, which we're going to get into more in the publisher session, but also that query service that you're talking about. So SQL actually lives within Platform, as does this idea of a Jupyter notebook. So you can basically go into Platform and say, find me all the segments of users who have been to my site 3 times in the past 2 weeks, are gold tier rewards members, and have spent over $500 in one of my stores over the course of the past 6 months. Retrieve me all those profiles. And that happens in real time. Then you're then able to take all those profiles or segments or IDs and then send them out for activation. Or you can access that same query via API, and that can sit on any type of your applications that you're building on top of Platform.
And is there an option to export the results?
Yes. Yep. Yes. Yep. So when you're exporting them to the CRM, you may just want to decide exactly what attributes specifically you want out of that tool, and then where are they going to land within the CRM.
So the Experience Platform, do I have access to PII data?
Yes.
I do.
Yes. Experience Platform and real-time CDP contain PII. Yes.
Okay, so like if I'm in banking,
Yep.
I can't really export the data. Right?
Well, it's going to be dependent upon your own internal regulations, and then we have to think about GDPR, CCPA, channel preferences, and your own internal policies, right? So as long as you are within,
It's up to me to decide.
right, and then we also, in terms of data governance, we have this idea of labels. So you can think about it, if we've already had this idea of privacy by design living in Audience Manager, which is a completely anonymous environment, think about how much more important these governance tools are when you're thinking about a platform like AEP or real-time CDP that now do contain PII. You have even more considerations. You have to be even more careful with those types of data sets. So you have these different labels that are customizable that you can append to your data sets and say, this contains PII, this contains demographic information, this has pseudonymous, all these different options where you're able to then define your data sets. And similar to that example I gave before, this contains this, so don't send it there. And if you try to do that, we have enforcement rules that'll block that from happening.
And is that already available? Like now you offering those services?
Yeah, so just to be completely frank, everything that we see here is 100% available today, with the exception of offers, which is coming in the middle of this year. Yep. All right, good questions. How are we doing on time?
Pretty good. I would say if we can get to the lift the hood.
Yeah, you want to demo?
3 or 4 minutes.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Excellent. Okay.
The goal is to wrap by maybe 10 of
Okay.
or so, and again, we can table the rest for
Sure.
published side
Okay.
if need be.
Yeah, that works.
All right, great. Thanks.
All right, so moving into identity, which is kind of the core of all this, right? So if we think about all these different channels and different identity fragments, it's really being able to reconcile all of these into a universal profile. So we're taking all these different, you can think of each one of these, this is kind of like a peek behind the scenes. If you think about each one of these rows as an individual device where we're appending additional attributes, it could be PII, it could be non-PII, it could be third-party data, second-party data, anything, offline attributes, anything in between. We're basically giving marketers the tools to dictate how and when we're blending those rows together. So we're not just going to probabilistically do this on the back end in a black box. We're basically giving you the tools to say, hey, if this user's authenticated and they're coming from this data source and their device is in this specific graph, then let's go ahead and blend those together. And these are just an example of, so you'll see this again in the demo at some point. We'll have, we have all these different identity namespaces that you're basically deciding which one of these is going to be your stitch to blend profiles together. So you have things, of course, like Adobe IDs, but then you have things like Google IDs and LiveRamp and Microsoft and email and phone number. And these could be any of your own individual internal IDs. But you're basically setting which one you want to be your primary ID and which one you're going to stitch together. So in this case, if it's email, and I log in on one device and then I log in on another device or another browser, it's going to merge those based on the email address. You can have secondary as well. Yes?
Are you enabling transparency to the user on how to shape the data so that they decide if it's accurate or opt out and stuff like the brand to have that information?
Yep. So a couple different options there. So if we're talking about the Adobe Co-op, which is opt-in as a brand, then you'd put terms in your privacy policy that we would supply to you where an end user could click on that link and come right to the Adobe Co-op site, and they're shown every single brand that's a part of the co-op. The logo has to go there. We show you each individual device we've stitched together of yours. You can unlink them if you want or completely opt out. And then also all the privacy terms, methodology, and conditions are also listed there too. So 100% transparent. If we're talking about being able to purge data, which is more of kind of like a GDPR functionality, then we have an API built for all Adobe solutions. It's not solution specific. We have one that spans across the entire Adobe experience ecosystem that me as an individual user could come to the site. I could say, what data are you collecting about me? In real time, it's using that query service, pings, returns all the different information that's being collected. If the information is wrong, I should be able to edit it. If I don't want to be a part of this at all, I should be able to opt out. And then one additional layer with California or CCPA is I also don't want you sharing this data with anybody, right? So all those tools are in place. Yep. Just quickly, in terms of the different options available, we have things like the deterministic option that we refer to as profile link. That's the very, again, I log in on one device, I log in on another device, the handshake is made, that cluster is created. The Adobe Co-op I just mentioned, that's kind of a blend of probabilistic and deterministic signals against everybody who's opting into the co-op. Also, there's nothing being shared between participants of the co-op. It's not like I'm going to take advertiser A and share all their behavioral information to advertiser B. It's literally just sharing the device stitches, and it's a give to get environment. Like you would have had to have seen me on a device in order for us to pepper in the second and third device. We're not going to give you advertiser A's entire device graph and vice versa. And lastly, we also have the partnerships with TapAd and LiveRamp in terms of if you already have a device graph and you want to use that, then by all means, agnostic, bring that into the platform and we can pivot and use that as well. All right, so with that said, I think this would be a good time to hop into the demo. All right, perfect. So what we're looking at right now is Adobe's real-time CDP. Again, this is an application service that sits on top of Adobe Experience Platform. At a very high level, you just get some metrics here with regard to the number of data sources, number of profiles, number of records that have been ingested. Again, the different types of identity namespaces. So we're thinking about Adobe Persistent ID, that ECID or phone number or email. You know, how many of those in relation to each other exist? What are the total recent segments, recent sources, things of that nature. So the example I'm going to walk through now, pretty simple, but it gets the point across. If we want to, let's say, connect to a CRM system, ingest some contact information, look at segments, look at a unified profile, and then activate that profile, we can look here and see some of the different recent sources. We can browse some of the current data sources that have been linked to this instance of the CDP. We can look at the catalog of out-of-the-box connectors. Of course, you see things like Adobe solutions here, but you also see advertising solutions. So you have your Amazons, you have AppNexus, Google, so on and so forth. So in this instance, what we want to do is quickly just filter by CRM. Let's go ahead and ingest Microsoft. This could be Salesforce, but in this instance, let's just use Microsoft Dynamics. Let's go ahead and configure this data source. Here's your authentication criteria to actually access Microsoft Dynamics CRM. So let's go ahead and connect that. Do I want to ingest contact information, lead information, or account? Again, let's just do contact information. And it's going to give you a small subset or example of the different records that you'd be ingesting from this data source. Yep, this looks good. Let's go ahead and bring these in. And this next step is really cool. So this is the XDM or Experience Data Model at work. So what you have on the left side here are essentially all the column headers of your data source that you're trying to ingest into the CDP. On the right side is a taxonomy from that Experience Data Model that you set up within the CDP. So this is what I gave the example before about Mike Ragusa versus Mike _ Ragusa. It's making some probabilistic assumptions that, well, in that column header here, this is represented by city, whereas in the schema, it's home address, city. So yeah, those are probably the same thing. So it's going to link all these together. Now you have, if they're incorrect, you have obviously have a drop down menu to correct them. Then it also, you'll see here this thumbprint there. That's that attribute is going to be what you're using as an identity namespace to blend profiles together. So in this example, it's email. That's the same example we've been using right along, right? I use my email address to log into on one browser or one device, and then I use my email address on another device or in branch or in store, and that's going to be my common denominator and the thread that's stitching together. So if I look at this and I say, yep, that those are all matched to the correct parameters, let me go ahead and click next.
Quick question.
Yeah, sure.
In the previous screen, the right-hand side, this is what Adobe defines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they already predefined by Adobe, and then I have to match my first-party data with the Adobe defined.
Right, so you're creating a schema, and you can create multiple schemas too. So, sorry?
Do you recommend the best way to match? Like, let's say I don't really know how to match it.
Yep.
Does
So,
the tool has the predefined set recommendation?
Yeah, so we have a couple different options there. So when we're talking about Adobe Analytics, those streaming attributes that come into real-time CDP, when they hit the real-time CDP, we kind of automatically organize a schema for you based on everything you have coming in from analytics. If it's coming from an external data source, like in this example, you would want to define what you want to be captured because you've probably got a ton of stuff in your CRM. Even just at the contact level, there's probably a lot of different attributes. Now, do you need all those in the real-time CDP? Probably not. And that's another big question that we get. Is this going to be a data lake? Is this meant to replace my EDW? And the answer is no, right? I mean, we do have some customers that are using it in that fashion. But at the end of the day, I would suggest not bringing anything into this system that doesn't have an data science or marketing application.
So it's connecting directly to the first-party database, or we have to send the file?
The file is being sent into platform, and then we're matching the two, the schema to your file. Yes? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's a good question. So I think during our implementation phase of CDP and platform, we have what's referred to as a pod, where you have a multi-solution architect, and you have consultants, and you have an array of different folks that are going to help kind of tease out the people in your organization that we need to speak to kind of help. Because you're right, the people that are organizing data and identifying the locations of your databases and your data warehouses and your data lakes are very different than the marketer that's going to be in there and say, I just want to create segments. I don't care. Just put the data in there. I don't care how. I don't care about the schema. I don't care about the data source. So that there are two different teams, and we coordinate with those two teams, and we usually start with use cases and work our way back. So your use cases are X, Y, Z. They're going to require data source A, B, C, and this is let's now decide which pieces of that data, what components of that data source you're going to need to accomplish these use cases. Use cases come from the marketer, and then we work with IT to make those plugins happen. Okay, so we're almost done configuring our data source. We can now set an end date if we so wish. In this example, we want this to exist in perpetuity, so we're not going to set an end date. We're just going to hit save and enable. And now that we've created that data source, what we're able to do is, if we jumped into the segment section, again, this is a travel and hospitality example. So, we have things like leisure travelers, no rewards, not reserved, and cart abandonment type use cases, some different metrics around the segments. I could browse the different types of segments. And again, we have loyalty travelers with children who have not reserved. So if I clicked on this, I can get an idea of exactly how many folks or how many devices are in this segment up here in the total right, how many qualified profiles are actually in this segment, and what is this, if we're thinking about all the profiles that exist in my entire instance, what percentage of that is this specific segment, right? And then we see the actual Boolean logic behind the scenes that went into creating this segment. So this is somebody whose search includes more than, and search includes children, and reservation equals no, right? So they've done some searching, we know they have children, but they did not actually book the vacation, cart abandonment type use case. So if we take this one step further,
Mike, can I ask a question?
sure.
As we look at the segments that are populated here, what is the source of these segments? Is this something that was populated? Is this observations based on the data? And then following up to that, when we're looking at loyalty travelers with the children, can the user change the tolerance or the threshold based on the definition? So maybe it's part of it, but maybe it's 2 visits, maybe I want 5 visits.
Right. Yep. Yeah, totally. So when we get into the actual building of a segment, we have a canvas that's really just dragging and dropping different attributes. And you know what? Let me just quickly open up another instance here. Yeah, so let me show you something else too. So while I'm in here, if I wanted to search for a profile, and if I wanted to use email address as, this is actually using the query service right now, and I wanted to use my corporate email, bear with me, this is going to be a lot to look at because it's kind of my test profile. So we've done a lot of stitching here behind the scenes, but you're able to see some of the PII that I've brought in mixed with some of the anonymous information. All these different ECIDs, again, this is my test account, so it's a lot to look at. You hopefully wouldn't see this in a live environment. But anytime I come to a site or a browser in an anonymous state, I get one ECID. I come back and I authenticate, I get another ECID. I go back in a different browser as an anonymous user. So those are all being blended together and also stitched together with CRM IDs. And I think to your point, you're also able to look at these real-time events. And these are the events that, think about this as like a chronological timeline of all the different interactions I've had with your brand. So maybe I did a mobile app page visit, then I was served an impression. I clicked on the impression, that brought me to a page. I viewed a specific product. I didn't buy that product. I searched for a different product. I actually ultimately made an in-store purchase. Point being, the data source of all these different fragments could be anything. They could be any of those data sources that we initially set up. And we did the CRM example, but it could be streaming in real time from analytics. It could be coming in from a pixel, from media engagement or an email open. It could be coming in from a call center via API ping. And then any of these signals, if I went into segmentation, and let's say I wanted to build a brand new segment, I have this canvas where I can take this idea of attributes and events
whereas the attributes are kind of static, like home address, phone number, things of that nature. Whereas the events are what we were just looking at, some of those like real-time attributes. And I'd be able to say, okay, let's throw in, I don't know, home address and just bring this over to the canvas. And then I could enter, I don't know, NYC and San Fran. And then if I went to events, I could say, well, this person clicked on something and then they actually completed a form and then they actually converted. And all this happened over the course of the past month, but then this specific action happened within 1 week. So lots of granularity here. And this is what I meant in terms of kind of the next evolution beyond DMP. Whereas, yes, you can set recency and frequency for DMP, but you have a lot more kind of tunage here. Yeah?
Mike, forgive if this was already asked, but from a B2B standpoint, or even with Pepsi, with
Sure.
some music festival stuff.
Yep.
Do you have an event in that type that says they stop by our booth?
Location based, 100%. So
I'm
that
asking for
yeah, so that can either be a beacon or that could be a geofence. And we have that location-based data built into our SDK that would go into your app.
But do you have integrations with Eventbrite or any of these other guys, either for registering with events that can automatically know whether we showed or not, and then you can scan the door kind of thing on the iPad?
Yeah.
And then physically at the booth, we scan your badge kind of thing for those folks?
Yeah, definitely. So not only that, but you could use beacons and or any of those systems that you just mentioned that every one of those sounds like it has an internet connection. And as long as it has an internet connection, then it has a protocol to make an API call.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then you can update any of these parameters. And all of those would be an event that would launch you into a journey orchestration if you wanted to go that far.
We just need to make sure though, so having worked with the events team, that when the person subscribes or registers, that information, they're allowed to be handed out.
Yep.
A lot of the event data, of the events.
Yeah, you gotta get it out to the checkbox, checkbox, either through the Eventbrite or live. Hi, we're gonna scan this badge and that means blah, blah. Yep.
I had another question.
Sure.
Is there separate permissioning? So like, for example, a lot of times on the client side, the marketing group is not allowed to see actually PII data.
Yep.
But they are the ones actually managing the system. So where I work, that's, the wealth management, investment management team were not allowed to share databases, but corporate was managing B2P.
Yep.
And so we were allowed to create segments on everyone's behalf, but they were very weary of anyone being able to see anything.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so that's what we refer to that as role-based access controls, where essentially you can take one single individual and or an entire group of individuals. So if you're the brand and you want to be wary of exactly what your agency has access to, or just different BUs within your own company, then you can say this data source is only accessible by these folks. This segment can only, this group can only create segments. They can't actually create data sources. This group can only activate. They can't create lookalike models, things like that. Caveat, just to be completely transparent, that's available and always has been available within Audience Manager DMP. That's coming to real-time CDP towards the end of Q1/Q2 of this year. Yep. All right. So back to our initial example, which we're almost done with. So we drilled into that specific segment. Again, loyalty travelers with children who have not reserved, cart abandonment. And now we see a subset of really specific individuals that have qualified for this segment. And this is also something that one of the lines in the sand between the CDP and the DMP is in the DMP, you don't get this granular look at everybody who's qualified for a segment. You could export the segment and see all these IDs that are incorporated into that segment, but you're not going to get this kind of one-by-one level of individual users that are now part of this segment. And if I wanted to go one step further, if I look at my friend here, Kate Richardson, and I drill into her profile, this is a much cleaner view of what I just showed you of my version. But again, we have the name, we have the PII information that probably came in from the CRM database that we mapped to Microsoft Dynamics. We have all the linked identities that we stitched together. We have channel preferences. And by the way, those channel preferences have been appended to the profile so that when I send this segment out with Kate Richardson's profile as a part of it, those channel preferences are a part of the payload. So when I send this to the Trade Desk and Google and AppNexus, Those channel preferences follow this profile, and then it's up to the individual point solution to honor those channel preferences.
Who sets these?
Those could come in a couple different ways, right? So if you've already collected those and you already have those stored somewhere, those would just be attributes that get appended to the profile, right? Or if somebody's actually on your site and they in real time click that, no, I don't want this information collected, that would be an attribute that follows into their profile and gets appended as well. Or if you work with a third party channel preference company, then you also integrate with that too.
Good question. So if I have a customer who opened an account in the branch,
Yep.
and that customer never went to the site,
Yep.
and I send that data to Adobe, you
Yep.
guys can stitch it on the back end.
So I think what you're referring to is more of a probabilistic stitching, because if they've never been to the site, they don't have a digital footprint. They don't have a digital ID. So in that instance, I would either one, recommend like a LiveRamp onboarder, where if you have a bunch of those use cases and a lot of those users and you have no digital match, then that's what LiveRamp does. You can upload all of your PII files and say, find me the digital equivalent of this user, and then we stitch those together. But I mean, you need some sort of a visit or a click or an email open or an ad
Let's say
view.
they went to the site, but they didn't open like online account. Like,
And they haven't logged in?
They haven't logged in.
Right, as of now, you would not connect those dots without an onboarder, or what we have coming later this year is you're gonna have a slider that's gonna give you more of a probabilistic option to dictate how you're blending them together. Today, 100% deterministic in experience platform / real-time CDP. Today, right. Eventually we'll have a slider that allows it to be more of a probabilistic matching kind of as you scale that, as you move that slider down, you're probably gonna get more scale, but your confidence interval is gonna go down with it. Right? So if you're looking for a high level of confidence, then you probably want to keep that high, but you might get less device stitches.
Okay, but today, let's say if I've been exposed to display, then went to store, opened an account, and then logged in, you guys can stitch that I was exposed to display.
Yeah, typically when you're exposed to a display ad, we're going to drop an ID there. If some sort of a beacon fires in the email, we're going to drop an ID there. If you come to a site, definitely dropping an ID there. So once you have those IDs dropped and then an authentication event happens, then we're stitching everything from your anonymous with your known, past, and then anything moving forward will all be stitched under that event tab that I just showed you with all those different interactions. Yep. The advertiser has consent. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see where this goes to in the next couple of years, right? So I mean, right now it's California, a couple other states that we have in the pipe, and then I would be shocked if we can't have 50 different sets of regulation by every single state. So I mean, at some point, I'd imagine the Fed jumps in and sets some sort of mandate one way or another.
Another question. Let's say if I want to do the multi-touch attribution, right?
Yeah.
I cannot export your data into my environment.
Yep.
That's not applied.
Yep.
So let's say I send you all the direct mail and all the other touch points.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an environment to actually build the model?
There is. That's going to be in the publisher session coming up. So data science workspace, you can build attribution model. We have Sensei, our AI ML tool that is out of the box recipe. You can just click on and have the attribution done for you. You can send it back to Adobe Analytics and do attribution there. Lots of different options. Or you can send it to Tableau or Looker and do your own modeling or do your own visualization dashboards. Yep.
Can you tell why we were hoping Mike and Adobe were one of our first three here? Please join me in giving Mike a big hand.
Nice, guys.
So, as expected, we're wonderfully over time for hopefully all the right reasons. So, lunch is available back there. We're going to shave 5 minutes off of that, and we're going to steal 5 minutes collectively in our next few sessions. And we'll be perfectly caught up by the time we get to our special guest to wrap up the day, Angie, over here. So the official break we'll put up on the sign. I got to do the math, but I think we originally had an hour, right? I think, yeah. So figure we're going to look at 10 of 2. We'll come back. Great. Thanks.
Some of his money. Jeffrey's money he wanted to. Jeffrey Kaufman, the programmers thing. So we're charging $10,000 a month. Are we paying Jeffrey out of that $10,000?
We're gonna pay Jeffrey out of our tech strat. Yeah.
Okay, so don't worry about. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So this automated segment recommendation in the CDP, all the folks that you have in your profile store, here's some of the unique traits that go along with it. And then also, here are some of the other clusters that you've been able to recognize. This is really high level. When you go into Adobe Analytics, that's where some of the more interesting stuff exists. And then also some of the stuff that we haven't talked about yet. I'll save it for the next session.
If you're covering it later, then.
That's okay.